South Africa's unemployment rate has worsened. Figures released by Statistics South Africa show that the unemployment rate for the third quarter rose to 29.1%. This is the highest unemployment level in more than 11 years. The unemployment rate stood at 29% in the second quarter. Over the past quarter, the number of unemployed people grew by 78,000, while those in employment grew by only 62,000 people. The number of discouraged workers, which means those people who were once looking for work but have now given up looking for work, increased by 44,000 during the quarter. Well, for more on this issue, I'm joined in studio by economist Xhanti Payi. He's from Nascence Advisory. Thanks very much for joining us, Xhanti.
My pleasure.
Good stuff. So this is a very hectic number, 29.1%. People may say, but you know, it's no different to the second quarter. It's a 0.1 percentage point increase. But of course, this represents people. This represents families.
Yes, and I think one of the key things on those numbers, we are seeing the number of people that are actually looking for work increasing by 590,000. So what we are seeing actually is that more and more people are looking for work, but less and less people are able to actually access work. So if you think about that, then you realize actually the desperation. Because I think sometimes we do get lost in whether it's 29% or 29.1%.
Yes.
But in actual real numbers, that's where we say actually the number of people who are not in employment has grown by another 590,000. That's a lot of people. That's 500,000, and only those actually who are out here looking for work. So over the past year alone, now you'll remember also what is interesting is that around this time, last year, there was a job summit. And that tells us something about whether or not our solutions are working. Because over a year since we had that job summit, we are still confronted with these kinds of numbers.
But then we have a structural problem in the economy, don't we? We have a situation, especially at the graduate level, where a lot of our graduates are said not to be work ready or can't match to what the work environment requires. We also have the fourth industrial revolution and all of these challenges facing us.
What I think is interesting about that is that, of course, we also know that our graduates are actually put through a lot of programs. You'll remember there's programs like Harambe, the YES program. So there's a lot of programs that are actually being put in this space where there's many companies who are inviting people to come and get all this experience. So you would have thought that that would also move the mark if it is indeed a skill situation or work readiness kind of program that we're facing.
Yeah.
It seems that actually that's probably not one of the I suppose the explanation. So we have to actually look deeper into what is actually happening inside corporations that is actually making it so difficult for people to have it. Because if we are actually training people, if people are, and many people, I think you'll realize that many people, young people in particular, don't actually go to school for what we call passion. They tend to ask, what should I study? What are people being employed to do? So a lot of young people will always be asking that question. So they, go into those courses in which people say, well, if you go to tourism, you'll get hired. If you go to commerce, that's where you're going to get hired. But still, we face the same problem. So it's difficult to see that.
What did we see in terms of the very crucial youth unemployment? Has that ticked up? And what do you think are the solutions? You talked about some of, the courses and things that are available, but that's for graduate level type people. We have many young people who haven't even got a metric. Absolutely.
And I think if you look at those numbers, so if you have some, if you're a graduate, you're likely, unemployable about 25% there, but 68% for those people who are not educated. So education, of course, is still a very important marker. 68% is a very, very high number. I think a lot of people have been warning us about this more and more, that the more young people get desperate, the more it's going to cause all sorts of conflict in our society. And I think you can see in the kinds of, sort of instability that's in our townships and young people actually joining all sorts of gangs, the drug problems that we are facing. So we are starting to see that actually young people are getting desperate, they are giving up, and that situation in itself, then by the time we actually find solutions, we're going to struggle to bring those people back into the work environment if they are trapped in crime, they're trapped in drug use. So one of the key things we have to do is to actually try and save them before they get into that. Because at some point we're going to say, they're discouraged, they're not looking, they're not in school, they're not in employment, and we're not going to be able to use them to bring them back. Which also brings us to the issue about if we think we can actually grow an economy if we leave our young people there. These are the young people, right, that have to actually are fresh enough with their brains to help us in the fourth industrial revolution.
That's right.
So we are leaving them behind, and that's tragic.
And the other issue as well is that we need the youth to actually fund things like our social security system, which is becoming unsustainable in terms of the number of people who are getting older.
Absolutely. And that's some of the key things. I think one of the issues, for example, that we are seeing in Europe is exactly this, that they are trying to now extend the years of work because they can't find their social security because they don't have a lot of young people. Now, we've been very proud as Africans, as South Africans, that we've got this big surge of youth. But that youth is of no use to us because they are not in work and training, and they are, as I said, getting stuck in drugs and unemployment and all these things and crime. So that actually, we might as well actually be dealing with the issues of Europe. But unfortunately for us, we don't have some of the successes the Europeans have already built over a long period of time in terms of industry, technology, and the kind of thing that they can actually still find ways, including actually trying to attract, much more capital to be able to do these things. So we have to actually attend to this problem in a very nuanced and critical sense.
Yes.
I think for the most part, you say we've sort of said, well, maybe it's the wrong skills, maybe it's this, but we have not actually scientifically zoomed into the problem so that we understand exactly the nature of unemployment. I mean, we always say, yeah, we've got a structural problem. Many of us, when we think about that, we're actually not quite clear what we mean by a structural problem. What is it in the structure of our economy that leads us to this kind of thing?
Yes.
And sort of all the stuff that, we talk about at our dinner tables, if you really look at it, it's not quite what we think it is.
Maybe you're right to a degree, maybe you're not to another, in the sense that my view is that actually we do have some solutions around, but the problem in South Africa is that we don't implement them. We heard from the Basic Education Ministry, there was a lot of confusion when they talked about giving youngsters a certificate at grade 9 to enable them to go to some sort of FET type of college. But when are they going to bring those colleges on stream? Is this something that we're just talking about in a bubble, in a cloud, that will happen 10 years hence? When you make a commitment verbally to us as South Africans, surely we must see the implementation and the practicality effected immediately so that our children get a better opportunity, because not all of us are born to actually go to university and become a professor.
The only problem we have in the FET colleges is that many of them will take young people and train them, but those young people cannot exit the FET programs because they don't get practical work experience at private companies. Remember, a huge part of FET colleges is a practical component that allows you then to exit the system, and many young people are not able to go and get those practicals. They're not able to actually be absorbed into these companies to get those practicals. And so many of them, if you look at the numbers, are stuck inside the system, even though they were getting the training and it's free and all of this. They are not leaving that system because the only way to leave and to graduate is to get that practical experience.
More to talk about, but not enough time. But you have just implied a possible solution, making sure that FET colleges and the commercial sector actually marry.
Together.
Thank you so much, Xhanti, for your time. Xhanti Payi, he's the director of Nascence Advisory. The Reserve Bank